Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
And Lars.
And welcome to this Friendo Club Wrestling News Brief. We don't do a lot of news here at Friendo Club, but this was pretty big stuff after we dropped our CM Punk AEW recap show today. We did a CM Punk bit on today's show where I said something like, yeah, I figure CM Punk's probably going to be back in AEW. That seems a little less likely within hours of me saying that. Because it seems to be falling apart again. And we're going to go into detail with any updates on this situation tomorrow over our podcast going in Raw. But Larson, what happened in the world of CM Punk today?
So, shortly after we did our show this afternoon, apparently Dave Meltzer, I think this is on the Wrestling Observer message board.
That's what it seems like it was.
Posted the following. It was a screen cap that was posted on Twitter. This is what Dave had to say. Do you know why they didn't advertise Punk versus Moxley longer and why it had a short build? Because Punk agreed to it, then AEW got a legal letter saying he wasn't down with it and wasn't doing it, and they didn't know if he'd come until Tony put his foot down. There are a lot of nice things I can say about him. You can absolutely argue his position on Moxley was correct, but you can't argue he willingly did what he was asked in that scenario. So, Phil apparently caught wind of that because it was all over Twitter, and then posted the following on his Instagram story, and there's a lot to digest here. As far as what Meltzer is referencing, it seems to based as well in what Punk is talking about here. This is a Mox Punk match on Dynamite that happened about a week and a half before All Out.
Right. So Punk came back. So this was the series of events. Punk came back at Quake of the Lake. Quake by the Lake.
So that was August 10th, I believe.
August 10th. And then him and Mox at the end of that episode, he came in, cleaned house. Mox and him had a bit of a standoff, stare down. Mox gave him the bird, shoulder checked him on the way out the ring. So they set up a match, which was really odd, like 2 weeks, I think, before the pay-per-view.
So it was the following week they set up the match. The 24th, they had the match.
The
31st was when Punk had the bit in Chicago where he's like, well, I'm Chicago is firing me up. I'm going to go and beat Mox.
And he had big speech from Ace Steel.
Yes. And then the following Sunday, I guess it was All Out.
You're right. Yeah.
So it was in the span of 3.5, 4 weeks maybe.
Right.
This all happened. So this is what Punk posted on Instagram quickly and then deleted it in response. Sigh. I wasn't cleared to come back to wrestle yet. Then plan was to wrestle at the pay-per-view. I sat and listened to Moxley's Rocky 3 idea, explained how I'd never seen a Rocky movie. And I thought the idea sucked, but if the boss wanted to do it, whatever. He said he wouldn't lose to me. I never experienced someone refusing to lose to me. I just laughed. I asked Tony if this was what he wanted. He said yes. He's the boss, so I said okay, but I need to be cleared first. They kept saying it could just be a squash, so I didn't need to be cleared. I scoffed at that. My health was more important. Dave Meltzer is a liar. Jericho is a liar and a stooge. They were plans, but plan always change, but I'll never put a company above my health ever again.
So there's a lot to unpack here, including how a 44-year-old man hasn't seen any Rocky movies.
Well, but he posted on Twitter in 2010 that he had never seen a Rocky movie.
I don't think that he's lying about that. I just think it's odd for a guy who's so enmeshed in like the fight game never to have seen Rocky.
I mean, he's weird. I know they're not Rocky tattoos, but he has like a Cobra from G.I. Joe logo tattoo.
Yeah, right. Yeah, any child of the 80s, like it's basically
be at least seen Rocky 4.
It's in our DNA. Like it's like required. But anyways, regardless. So there is some interesting things here. He says, number one, if Mox is saying, yeah, it's like Rocky 3, and then Punk's like, I've never seen a Rocky movie before, but that sounds like it sucks. Rocky 3 was actually kind of cool. But regardless, he thought the idea sucked, but the boss, Tony Khan, wanted to do it, so whatever. This next part is interesting to me because he said he wouldn't lose to me. Now, that can be interpreted a number of ways because he doesn't clarify there. This is one possible way to explain it. Maybe Mox didn't want to lose clean in a single match at the pay-per-view, which is why they wanted to do the squash in advance of that. Let's be clear. At the time, Mox was unbeatable. Absolutely unbeatable. So the idea is this monster Mox squashes Punk And then Punk has to find his confidence the way Rocky had to find his confidence. But they didn't do an angle where Ace Steel had a heart attack after being shoved by Mox and died like that happened in Rocky 3. But everything else kind of follows the Rocky 3. At the time we were saying that as well. Right after the squash went down, we're like, oh, they're doing Rocky 3 here. Mm-hmm. I figured Punk, but I didn't see the tweet from 2010. I figured Punk would be a big Rocky fan, but apparently not.
Yeah, I would have thought so too. So yeah, as far as Mox not wanting to lose, there's several ways to interpret that.
What's the difference? Yeah, give me your interpretation.
Another one I thought was maybe like they pitched the Rocky 3 idea, and Punk, was like this. He says I laughed. Maybe he countered with, well, how come? Why don't we just do the match here? Why don't I just beat you here instead of the pay-per-view? And Mox was like, no, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because if Punk is going to walk out of All Out as champion, there's benefit, you could say, to him going into that match as the underdog.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
especially if Punk's going to stay babyface. I've seen speculation online that Mox didn't want to lose because he was basically carrying AEW at that juncture.
He was, yeah.
And, as interim champion, at least give him a week as champion, undisputed champion, before he drops the belt to Punk, just out of respect to Mox.
By the way, Mox was right because Punk immediately got injured. and did they have to put it back on Mox? They did, didn't they? They put it right back on Mox.
Yep.
So, yeah. He says, my health is more important. Dave Meltzer is a liar because Dave's the one put that out there. Jericho is a liar and a stooge.
So I assume he is saying Jericho is the source of a lot of the stuff.
He's putting them together. Because, of course, it had been reported as well that Jericho was, saying that he was going to make sure that Punk doesn't come back. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is that moment. Maybe that's happening now.
This part is interesting, where he is mentioning that whether it's Mox or Tony Khan or both were pressuring him to wrestle without being cleared.
Yeah, they kept saying it could be a squash, so I didn't need to be cleared. Yeah. Where is it? Okay, so yeah, I wasn't cleared to come back to wrestle yet. Then the plan was to wrestle at the pay-per-view. So he wasn't cleared to come back, but the plan was to wrestle at the pay-per-view.
So I would imagine, so he came back August 10th. The pay-per-view wasn't for another 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. The idea being it was pretty certain he would be
that
cleared.
He was close enough to being clear that they can start working him back into storylines, but he hadn't been officially 100% cleared. I mean,
right.
I guess that's not unheard of. If memory serves, Cody said he was cleared like shortly before the Royal Rumble this past year.
Yeah, right.
Officially 100% cleared.
Yeah.
And I don't know the protocol for clearance to wrestle per se. I don't know how that generally happens.
Yeah.
If like a situation where they're doing their rehab and the doctor says, all right, you should be good to go. Mm-hmm. That's communicated to the front office. Front office says, all right, we can start working you into plans. Mm-hmm. And then whether it be the doctor that works for the promotion, someone outside of that, gives them the official clearance. I don't know the protocol, so don't know anything about that.
Sean Ross Sapp had a tweet from during that time that he subsequently today retweeted, where he had said one of his sources say that it's possible that Punk wasn't going to show up at the Dynamite.
I remember that was, at the time, we thought that was related to the Hangman stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And there was a full Fightful Select thing about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I mean, this is, as far as we know, this is the first we've heard about all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So pivoting to, me earlier in the day saying, he's going to come back. Sure. Cause it's water under the bridge. Evidently the communication still isn't there.
Yeah.
With, the people appropriate to communicate with. And that this wouldn't play out behind closed doors. If Dave Meltzer put something out there, It seems, look, man, I have no idea what's going on. Nobody does, except for a very small number of people.
Yes.
And I'm not saying Punk is in the wrong or anybody else is in the wrong or in the right or whatever. This just sounds like a horrible way to communicate anything to anybody. And it seems like if this kind of stuff persists, nothing's going to change, because he's doing here what he did at Brawl Out at the press conference there. He's just airing this stuff publicly. You know, the dirt sheets kick up dirt, and then he complains about it publicly. Mm-hmm. And Tony Khan evidently doesn't make any effort to be like, hey, there seems to be no line of communication between these two people, where if something happens publicly like this, for Punk to respond to Tony Khan and say, hey, like, can we get on the same page here and see that this stuff isn't getting out? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of crazy to me, if there has been any idea of him coming back, but evidently there just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of communication, period.
No,
like,
it doesn't seem to be much. No.
There was an idea ages ago that, they were looking at a buyout for his contract, and that seemingly didn't happen because we'd know.
Yeah. And
then he's dropping all these hints about, hey, I want to come back. This might be framed in that maybe he doesn't want to. Maybe the Steve Karen book stuff was more like, they solved it back then. We could have solved it now, but like, they don't know how.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just waxing about how shitty things are.
That's entirely possible. So I pulled up the Fightful Select report. This is from August 18th. So the day after Mox, they made the Mox versus Punk match for Dynamite. This is the day after that.
Yeah.
So the preface here is largely about the Punk Hangman stuff. Mm-hmm. But down towards the bottom, it says sources familiar with the situation claim that CM Punk has often verbally expressed his displeasure, including recently so blatantly that they thought he might end up quitting the company. Those close to him said he might have almost decided to stay home instead of coming to the August 17th Dynamite, but don't think he would have quit. It continues here. Fightful has also told the Mox versus Punk match for August 24th was a late decision. We haven't been told how late. We asked AEW higher-ups for context. We didn't gain any.
Yeah.
So, if Punk was already frustrated about the Hangman stuff, comes back, and then, I imagine in his mind, he's like, I'm back from injury. I'm here to reclaim the title I never lost. Mm-hmm. Let's go forward with that. He's presented with a storyline that apparently he has no knowledge of. The Rocky 3 thing involves him losing. Mm-hmm. And, in his own words, he thought it sucked. Asked Tony Khan, is this what you want? Khan said yes. And based on Punk's account, he's like, all right.
Yeah.
So.
But then Meltzer claims there was like a letter of some sort. Mm-hmm. So look, this is clearly the bottom line is there's no way to know who's right or who's wrong. But the bottom line is there does seem to be some communication issues that if anybody expects to see CM Punk back in AEW, they got to be figured out. Like, that stuff has to get figured out.
At this point, I'd say if anybody expects CM Punk to be back in AEW, it's not happening.
So what you're saying is if you're planning on betting any money on CM Punk coming back, don't do that.
Don't do large sums. If the odds are good.
Yeah, chase that action a little bit.
If it's action worth chasing, you put $1 down, it could net you $1,000. Sure, have at it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Don't put a second mortgage out in your house for this, because my prediction of CM Punk wrestling in 2023 ain't looking too good at this point.
Well, there's still 8 months left in the year, and who knows how long the no compete clause is, but. New Japan, WWE,
Impact Wrestling.
That's definitely, I would not chase that action on Impact Wrestling. I tell you what. Oh man,
you don't want to see CM Punk versus Ed Edwards?
It has nothing to do with do I want to see it, but there's no way they're going to have that money. No. I'd love to see CM Punk versus PCO, but one man will come out of that injured. It's not going to be PCO. So, anyways, we'll continue to follow this. Obviously, tomorrow, Friday, we've got, or if today, if you're watching this on Friday, we've got Going in Raw happening over at youtube.com/Steven Larson, live on the Twitch and in the audio realm as well. We'll get back to some silly shenanigans here at Friendo Club Wrestling. I believe we've got a wonderful tale of Larson two-sweeting somebody coming up tomorrow. Or did he? It's our own fact or fiction. Tomorrow on Friendo Club Wrestling.
It's fiction.
Or did I? So yeah, be sure to check that out. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll catch you over at Going in Raw.
Goodbye.